truck base, you'll win the race.
You're listening to Trucking Tomorrow, your go-to podcast for exploring and understanding the future of trucking from a carrier's perspective. In each episode, we sit down with industry veterans to discuss what it takes to grow your trucking company in today's world. So let's hit the road with Trucking Tomorrow. Here's your host, Brian Jones.
Welcome to Trucking Tomorrow, presented by TruckBase, where we talk about the stories of the trucking industry leaders, everything from operations to technology to policy. I'm your host, Brian Jones, and I'm grateful to be joined today by Tim Henry, the co-founder and CEO of Hall Compliance, which is a modern software for safety, compliance, and risk management. Tim, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited always to join someone's community and kind of share a little bit about what we're building here at Hall.
Well, just to kick us off, we'd love to hear a little bit about Hall. Can you tell me a little bit about who Hall is and what you guys do for everyone listening in?
Yeah, you did a great job in summarizing kind of what we focus on. On the big sizzle title, it's fleet risk software. But really underneath that, we really focus on a few things and we really try to do them well. We help fleets maintain their DOT compliance. We help fleets manage their safety program. And how we think about that is those two major pillars really fill in kind of what we think about a risk management program within a fleet. And we'll dive in a little bit what we specifically mean, but that's really the three areas: compliance, safety, and risk.
Cool. Thanks for hopping in there. I know you have a long and varied history in the trucking industry, but we'd love to hear a little bit about why you started Hall and what kind of drove you to go and tackle this problem.
Yeah, thanks. And it has been windy, like any startup story. It's just all about staying on the field and keep building and really trying to find problems that matter to people. And when my co-founder Tuan and I first started building under Hall, we actually were building a much different company. We were coming out of Uber, and we really had a strong focus on labor marketplaces, the gig economy, what Uber's really known for. And our initial business model wasn't fleet compliance software. It was actually building a modern platform for CDL drivers who don't own their own trucks to find jobs. Without getting too much into detail, it's actually quite painful in a sense where it's time consuming. It's a regulated rec. So for any driver, whether you're a new entrant or you're a 10-year veteran, you follow the same process. And Tuan and I said, hey, what if we gave, drivers opportunity to get certified once and be able to find jobs of a day, a week dedicated that fit their lifestyle, pay, and schedule, right? I think you and I both benefit from, the type of work we want to do, and drivers should do the same thing. So initially, the first 2 years of Hall, we were really trying to digitalize was the CDL driver staffing model. And about 2 years in, things were going great. We had about 10,000 drivers actively on our platform looking for jobs in California, Texas, PA, and Georgia. And we had to build our own software to really help that. Drivers would find us on the app, they would get certified, and our system would have to continuously monitor drivers to make sure they're DOT compliant. And above that, met the safety standards of that specific fleet that they were interested in working for a day, a week, a month. And we had to build our own OS. And I was at that time, I'm not new to trucking and freight markets. And I knew that trucking may be seeing some headwinds coming. We kind of saw that from the micro economy. At a conference, I was chatting with the head of safety and compliance at a very large fleet. And I was telling about the business, like, hey, I think we built something great. And, I only have 2 safety people managing 10,000 drivers. And he paused me and said, what do you mean by that? Okay, what do you mean exactly by that? Because historically, it takes a lot of human capital to really manage drivers and their compliance and their safety programs. And 2 years ago, we were invited down to their headquarters to demo what we built internally for our own drivers. And we were actually we were able to close them as a customer. And since 2 years ago, we've actually broadened out the platform to go beyond just driver compliance to a fundamental fleet compliance and safety software that not just manages the DOT compliance of a driver, but also the assets. So I've been learning along this journey, but that's how we found ourselves here, and we found that I think the biggest problem that we're really trying to solve today.
That's awesome. I love those stories where you didn't intend to solve that exact problem, but someone solved what you built and hey, that's what I want. Can I buy that? Well, it's not for sale, but we can figure something out here.
Yeah, and it took a lot of courage. It wasn't premeditated. It just we were interested in solving problems, and we were able to surround ourselves by people who knew the space more than us, and moving the ego and being able to say, "Hey, maybe they're onto something." I think that's the biggest advice I would have anyone building anything.
Yeah, well, I would love to hear a little bit more about whether it's in that interaction or just how you guys have accomplished that. Having two safety people managing that many drivers is a feat, right? So what's in the magic sauce, so to speak, that's powering what Hall does and what's unique there?
When we're building our initial business and kind of what fleets now get to benefit from is one, a really modern tech platform. This is, at TruckBase, this is what you promote too. It's like, hey, we are modern tech architecture. We can actually integrate across other business applications because that's just how I think you and I associate to software. It's less what can it do? It's more what can it integrate to centralize my work, my kind of workflow. And that was a eerily similar issue with this initial large fleet. They had a lot of people in the mix, but also a lot of systems that just didn't talk. So, for example, when I'm hiring a driver, I have to collect their license. And there's a kind of core driver qualification files you have to collect that's mandated by the DOT. And there's one thing just to collect them, to be compliant, to say, I have these records. But there's another thing to audit them. And that's a very human intensive endeavor. So if you have 5 drivers to 10,000 to 25,000, you have to historically manually audit these documents against each other to say, hey, yes, that license matches the medical card. And that medical card physician that's written down in a handwritten note actually matches a physician that's registered with the FMCSA. That little motion historically is either human, it's a human process. What we've done for that initial use case, just collecting documents and cross-validating them, we're essentially building a safety manager in a box. We're taking the DOT regs, putting them in our software, and really cross-referencing documents from each other. And then we provide recommendations on top of that layer. So, that little use case, now their team, one, they don't need as many people to do the same process as before. But two, humans make mistakes. There's not enough coffee in the world to keep me from not making a mistake, but software is really good at catching things. In that initial use case, and this is really the initial use case was for the largest of the large carriers in the United States, we saw that there's a lot of value just to automate a lot of these compliance checks and providing recommendations. And we'll go on later, but we think fundamentally the majority of trucking isn't the largest fleets of the country. It's mid-sized, small carriers that they don't have any break. They still have to follow the same DOT standards. So we're really excited to bring our software to them as well.
You talked about connecting the dots. It sounds like a lot of what you guys are doing is connecting all the different pieces that historically has been a very manual and challenging audit process and connecting it across systems, even within the same system. I would love to hear a little bit about how you work with existing compliance and safety programs, because they are things that if you're running a fleet today, you have to have solved this already in some shape or form, or you're out of business. How do you replace, transform, participate in? How do you think about engaging with what a fleet already has running on the ground?
No, you're absolutely right. And sometimes fleets don't know what they don't know. Fundamentally, they have some insurance requirements. They may be, let's say they're a fleet of 25 trucks and they get off the shelf insurance and the policy says you have to hire a driver of this age and you have to use equipment of this age. Like I'll follow that, COI compliance, right? That's the compliance I have to follow to maintain my insurance, for example. But then there's DOT and there's a lot of great content online, but it's really surface level. It's like, okay, you got to maintain this permit. So the first step is getting all the data into our system. So if a small fleet were to, create a Hall account today, they would connect their ELD, they'll connect their FMCSA account and populate our system right away. And what our system acts as, hey, if this was day one of your fleet, these are the things you need for your drivers and for your assets. That's just documentation, reports that you need to either run right now or get in the system and start tracking. Because if the classic one is a license expiration, but you can solve that with Google Sheets, right? You don't need Hall to do that. But right away, our system's educating a fleet saying, based on this regulation, this is why you need to go beyond just this document. So there's going an extra step. For this piece of equipment, because you're in this state, you actually need this permit, for example. Or, hey, you're actually moving what type of equipment? You need this. So going a step and beyond. And again, what we're suggesting is not new, right? Historically, a safety manager would know this, right? If a sales rep runs into an office, say, I just got some dedicated freight, high fives all around. But a safety manager mindset say, okay, what kind of freight? What state are we going to? One, I need to see if we have drivers that have the endorsement. I need to make sure our equipment had the permit. They're not the negative Nancy, but they're trying to keep the lights on. There's only a few agencies out there that can shut you down today. One of them is the DOT. A lot of this is kind of this boring administrative task work that is compliance. And that's how kind of our system takes that next step. And that's even going beyond, hey, this is DOT compliance things you need to jump on right now. But then our system starts really noticing behavior within your truck. So it's going beyond just compliance, getting into the safety program, which is more of driver behavior, scoring, et cetera. So that's where we kind of take that safety manager mindset and just put it in software. So anyone really can be a safety manager overnight.
You're hinting at something that I would love to define, excuse me, in your view, which is risk, safety versus compliance, right? Those are buzzwords, right? And they're often talked about in the same sentence, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So how do you think about the three and how they interconnect here?
Yeah, I'm glad you acknowledged it. They are interchangeable a lot of times, which it's kind of like saying ELD, right? That's kind of the classic. Hey, what kind of ELD? It's like you and I that build products. You're like, well, ELD is one feature of a broader fleet management system that does X, Y, and Z. So my mindset's the same way. As I think of it as, I think I mentioned it like a triangle, right? I kind of overall maintaining DOT compliance and maintaining a safety program really boils down to risk management, right? Really what Hall is, and it's a loss control system. It really gets ahead of issues, whether it's driver related, equipment related, regulatory related, to keep the lights on, to make sure we don't go under. So that's kind of where I always like to start. Like fundamentally, we play in a risk management game. We just happen to be focused on trucking. And risk management, as I've been able to surround myself with kind of some best in class, and we have some public announcements with partnerships, is you start from the agreements you have with your customers and go down, right? Your employment agreements, like that's all risk management. We don't really think about it, but the indemnification we signed off on with that shipper, the employment contract we have with our drivers, the leasing agreement we have, that is all risk management in a sense where if something happens, it's going to trigger an event. So I like to zoom out a little bit because that's kind of the stakes. If now we zoom in, compliance is really kind of the binary. Like, what does the DOT say we got to do today? What does our insurance say we got to do today? So that's very binary, yes or no, really no gray area. And that's really touches driver, assets. And then safety really touches kind of the behavioral coaching and the human factor, which I manage a lot of humans at Ford in the previous life of Hall. It's very difficult. But safety, I always say, is really the kind of preemptive training, the ongoing coaching, and really start monitoring behavior that can lead to risky behavior. So that's why, leveraging integrations with the cameras and ELDs, we can start scoring risky behavior of a driver. Not to say they're a bad driver. We're not in the position, but mostly there's so much noise coming off of, an MBR report, coming off of the ELD, the camera. Not to knock any of our integration partners or technology providers, but there's a lot of noise, right? And I've got a chance to chat with many fleets out there, and the problem is sometimes they're overloaded. So our goal is how do we kind of like find the actual things you need to focus on within all the safety events coming out and jump on it. It really suggests, hey, this driver has been going over hours, HOS compliance issues based on this. This is why you can't do this. You should probably suggest this course to the driver, right? That is historically safety manager motion. So that's really how I define it. And then how our software really tries to kind of pull these levers. Again, we're really acting as a safety manager in the box at the end of the day.
Sifting through the noise, I think it resonates a lot with the small carriers that we work with primarily, because they don't have the time to do that themselves. Typically, the safety manager is wearing another hat. And so they're focused a bit more on the compliance side and a little bit less on the proactive safety management side. So that makes a lot of sense.
A lot of different hats. And, it's what makes trucking amazing, but also can get a lot of operations into trouble. And I always say I strongly believe that no fleet really tries to be unsafe. They just really lack the resources. And this is really fundamentally why we're in the space is as we're working with some of the largest fleets out there, you can actually buy risk mitigation at the end of the day. You can deploy all the tech in the world, have all the great lawyers in the world. Unfortunately, the average fleet of less than 25 trucks cannot afford that. So they have to be way more proactive in order to catch risky events within their fleet, whether it's compliance related or safety, to get ahead of it because they don't have another shot. Sometimes they're an accident away of just shuttering. So, and that's on top of just uncertain times we're in today. So again, that's why that's like our mission is like, how do we bring the best practices down to, the majority of trucking?
I know you mentioned you work with some larger fleets, but then some smaller ones as well, it sounds like. But would love to hear maybe across the board or by size, what risks you hear carriers talking most about in 2024? What's on their mind? What are you hearing from your partners and why they're kind of thinking about this right now?
Yeah, I think, if I pick on the large and I'll talk about small is, the larger carriers out there, they're similar to the smaller fleets are just economic uncertainty, right? I think everyone has a sense of that. We're squinting the eyes. And again, we're going into a presidential year and I'm not very political, but it's a given that is going to be a tumultuous economic year. So that's one. And that manifests itself as is there freight to move, right? Is that dedicated freight I signed up to late last year going to be there this year? If you're a smaller carrier that supplements your loads with spot, boy, oh boy, don't get me started on kind of the rates and how they changed since 2 or 3 years ago. So again, there's many people who've talked about that. So economic certainty, is there business for us to move that can pay the bills, right? So I think that's the fundamental crux. Rising cost, right? And it's just fundamentally the reality. Fuel's expensive, the leasing terms maybe not as favorable. And then the crux of just fundamental cost increases insurance, right? Insurance is an outsized portion of fleet's costs. And that's why, we've partnered with some leading insurance providers out there is because it is a very correlated. If you are a safe fleet, if you maintain great operations for maintenance, compliance of drivers, if your CSA score is at a good standing, if you can show great safety program, like with Hull, is that just a plug? It is proven you get cheaper insurance, right? And that is a fundamental cost. If you can bring down, it can really increase your overall profitability. That's why we're publicly, made some public announcements with insurance partnerships, not only I'm very open with their strategy. It's like, in order to really reach the masses, we really have to partner up with people who serve that audience, right? And one of the major providers are in the insurance industry, and they have a very clear incentive structure to really partner with Hull. Like our goal is to keep your fleet safe and compliant, and their goal is to really be able to take their insured out to market for preferred premiums. I think the top two is just uncertainty. Can I make this investment right now? Are things going to go up so I can actually invest more into the business and just increasing cost? And our goal is to really tackle at least the insurance one.
That makes sense. The insurers, more than anyone, know the cost of risk, right? So they can probably price what you're talking about anyone else.
Oh, totally.
So you're talking about a few different service providers, different tools, mentioned ELDs, mentioned getting access to your FMCSA records. If you were to just lay out, let's say I'm a small fleet, I'm educating myself, what's the modern toolkit? And Hall may be a piece of that, but it sounds like there's other vendors and pieces of this that a carrier should be thinking of when thinking about their compliance and safety program as a whole. What are the check boxes they should be thinking about?
Fundamentally, when I think about a trucking operation, they need a solid ERP. In our world, that ERP is a TMS, right? So they need to chat with you, but they do need,
I appreciate that.
They do need to structure their operations somewhere. And again, if they're super small, they can't make the investment TMS, get a Google Sheet, right? Let's get everything you need access and you centralize your data. You understand per load, what is the a P&L per load, like what are we making on that load? I need to get that granular. So anyway, I'm just big on centralizing the data to really understand. Secondly, when it comes to compliance, I have to give the DOT and FMCSA a lot of credit where they do have a lot of published information to really educate a fleet on what they need to do to stay compliant. Again, it's very kind of boring reading, but there's a lot of people who really can translate that into I'm a layman, layman's term. Just explain it to me. Like I don't have enough time. I'm trying to book this load. There's a lot of great third-party consultants out there that just know DOT compliance. They have a lot of great free content. And this is a plug for a former partner of ours, TruckSafe. They have great DOT content for the safety manager, compliance manager, and owner, right? Go out, look, they have tons of free YouTube videos. Watch a video every morning just to learn one little thing. On the driver side, I think the biggest thing when it comes to kind of driver compliance and asset, I'll just go really quickly. There's a lot of just things you just don't know when you don't know. So, and the biggest thing when we deal with people is really background screenings. So again, educate on what background screenings you need to do. The most one that comes to mind is drug screen and clearinghouse query. When you need to pull them, what happens in an accident, and just have an SOP there. Like, for example, when there's an accident or suspiciousness, for example, you may think one of your drivers may be under the influence. There's a process to follow to drug screen your driver outside of buildings. I'm a rock climber, right? I live in risk management outside of the whole Monday through Friday. I rehearse a lot of scenarios for self-rescue. What if my belayer gets hurt and I need to come down? Or what if my climber gets hurt and I need to pluck him off the cliff? I have an SOP. I watch videos just to know what happens because in the moment you're going to be and even in an accident, you're going to be so throttled up, you won't know what to do. So have these, it's just boring work. And if you have extra hour here and there, build out an SOP. What do we do when there's an accident? And your insurance carrier should have an SOP you can leverage as well. And they're incentivized to get that claim in as fast as possible. What if there's a reasonable suspicion? What do we do? What do I do when I'm just hiring a new driver? And there's a lot. So I would say when it comes to the people and kind of the people arc and then the accident arc, have an SOP built, because in the moment, you just want to be moving. You don't have time to second guess yourself. So that's on the human capital management, because people are people. On the asset maintenance, this is, I think the biggest thing, if a truck's not moving or not making money, type of attitude and getting ahead of not just the basic compliance of a piece of asset, whether a tractor, trailer is annual, preventative, right? If you get ahead and you really keep your equipment in good order, it really it lowers the probability at just being out of commission, right? Because you cannot afford, I always try to put myself I can't afford to lose a contract. I am already fighting, clawing my way to build my fleet. I landed that dedicated lane. You cannot afford to miss a pickup, because I've been on the other end. I've been on, when my days of building Uber Freight and really finding dedicated carriers for lanes, we grade, right? And again, unfortunately, you just can't get into every scenario with every small carrier and the story of why you weren't able to make that pickup or why you're delayed, right? It's just the
do it.
Yeah. And again, it's preventative. It's hard to invest in what you don't know. So that's one, just get equipment maintenance in order. We've been really tackling that, and we'll have some announcement on a product feature coming on the PM schedule, et cetera. And then the third is get some sort of telematics device. It doesn't need to be a leading ELD provider, but one, you should probably have it by now. But two, there's a lot of data on where your trucks are going, what lanes you typically move. I think those are the three. It's get smart with third-party data around DOT compliance. There's a lot of free resources. YouTube is an amazing resource. Maintenance, get ahead. Just having a program that you follow. It doesn't need to be rocket science, but just following a maintenance schedule, you just getting ahead of any issues. And then third is, really start leveraging a lot of that telematics data, because you can really you can understand performance of drivers, average fuel spend, there's just a lot of byproducts there. And in GSOPs, the only reason really Haul exists and these these new upstarts is because there's so much data coming off the truck. And we're a byproduct of hey, there's too much now. We need to kind of understand the noise and really figure out, but we haven't been at this, and maybe kind of touch on what we can talk about later, but we're just in this new way to manage a fleet operations that much data was really only allowed for the largest fleets out there. And now a smaller carrier can really operate with the same granularity than a Knight Swift, right? Or a Schneider. So Yeah, it's just a really interesting time where a lot of the price point, a lot of the tools that was only for the large really are accessible for the mid-sized to small carrier.
I love that. I think the one thing you mentioned there was the applying SOPs to other parts of your life. I'm gonna take note of that for my next date night with my wife, and have the SOP for our date night. See how that goes here.
I know it's the byproduct of my Uber days, but it's when you're moving so fast, you need some way to knowledge transfer, right? And get that out. And heck, I think there's a former Uber alum who's building like a SOP software, but it's just getting down the process so you can share it, understand it, and jump on it when the time comes. It's a good rule to have.
Yeah, we hear that a lot about the carriers we work with. We call them professionalizing carriers. They're moving from spreadsheets, text, WhatsApp. They want to take that next step, and they try and figure out what that next step should be. And so a lot of these things fit into, hey, what is a slightly more professional, carrier operations from a safety and compliance standpoint look like? And maybe to put you on the spot here, because you had talked about a lot of different things. If you had to point at one action of, choose a small fleet, 20 trucks, they want to improve, what one thing should they start doing tomorrow just to take a step in the right direction?
In general, in just their journey of growing their business, I really do think, and again, this is I'm preaching to the choir. I'm a very commercial CEO, or I nothing matters if you're not making money, right? And I think we work for the for-profit type of business. I think the first is really trying to lock down dedicated business, because the moment you can lock down really position yourself as not just a small carrier, a dependable carrier that, oh, you use EDI or API. Oh, this is how you get status updates. And this is definitely more your world. That step allows you to bid on freight, just like everyone else, allows you to provide the service level as any other carrier. Doesn't matter if it's you versus Schneider. That's the next step, because if you can do that, really lock that, and that just takes pure will and salesmanship. You can then know, okay, what is the revenue coming in the door today? We know what we're going to get from a top line perspective. And then you can start turning around and then look within your organization. It's like, how do we grow the margin here? Like, what can we automate? Like, what are we not being efficient with, right? And so I think once you get that dedicated revenue, or at least portion of your revenue mix that's dedicated, certain, you can really start looking within to really start thinking about how we can improve X, Y, and Z. That's going to be hard, right? I'm not going to say it's just an overnight thing, but once you do that, you can start thinking about next quarter, next year. That is a very privileged place to be. Every business gets there. And so again, that's right off the cuff. That's where my head goes.
Well, I'd love to shift gears a little bit and look towards the future, right? The last 10 years, we've seen a lot of changes in the safety and compliance landscape. ELDs are everywhere. They're required almost universally, not entirely, but beyond that, the availability of data, the availability of platforms, the makeup of the carrier market has changed a lot. And so from your perspective, what do you see happening in the next 10? Do you see as much change? Do you see a steady state? I'm just kind of curious if, in the spirit of trucking tomorrow, what's coming tomorrow for safety and compliance in your view?
So what's happened in the past 10 years, and I luckily have been able to jump. I only know logistics and transportation tech. I happened to just jump in this space right out of college when people were just talking about tracking software. I'm talking about the macro points before FourKites was there, and P44, and when there wasn't many other, people weren't jumping on modernizing the TMS of it. It was an interesting time. If I flash back now, I think, the one thing I always thought is, because I come from the freight brokerage world, and, and I think everyone should kind of broker a load, because it's like the true sense of salesmanship, really showing your value. I'm helping you move your product from A to B, and you really have to show value from the shipper and also to the carrier. It's a two-sided transaction. I just think there's some magic there that everyone should experience and just build some grip. But things are just moving faster. So on the brokerage side, and again, who knows if this is right? I try not to guess what the future is. I think we're going to probably see some consolidation of brokers. I think if we look to where the brokerage model is today, I think we may have extracted as much value from it, in a sense of they only can get really bigger, in my opinion. And you're starting to see the brokerage model change to more of a 3PL. They're doing more than just brokering a load. They're managing routing guides. They're doing supply chain. It's not just a freight brokerage anymore, right? And if you look to CH and their different differentiation and their different service lines and every other major freight brokerage. So I think, I'm uncertain there. I think when it comes to the carrier, and again, if I double click on my real lane is, I'm starting to see compliance and safety and risk software embedded to other things in a sense where more and more, the biggest existential threat for trucking is that insurance it hasn't gone down at all. And, I won't go down the rabbit hole of why that is with the kind of social inflation of kind of the verdicts really increasing it. And really what I think is, and where we're seeing Hall being leveraged and other softwares too. And again, I won't try to plug Hall too much, is that insurance carriers and insurance brokerages are getting under the hood way more with their insurance than ever before. And they're leveraging tools like Hull to get access to information they never even wanted to see before, because it's getting that dire in the sense where I need to make sure you are staying compliant, because me as an insurance broker, I need to make sure you're around, right? That's my business model, is to keep you compliant, take you out to market, and then, make my percentage of the premiums. Like, that's their business model. And the insurance carrier, they always leverage insurance brokers to find opportunity, distribute their insurance product. Even them, they're you had Nationwide leave the market, when a very large commercial auto provider. So the loss ratios for the insurance carriers are just getting so bad, where they are really now saying, we need more skin in the game. We need to be in their operations in real time to understand what risks are happening, whether it's on the drivers being hired, driver activity, what's their assets look like, or getting a ton of inspection, because the traditional underwriting method of the trucking company is just not working. Just reality. You wouldn't have people going under, and people can debate me here, but so fundamentally, with more data coming off these trucks, more people are going to try to leverage it to benefit their own operations. My prediction is that more compliance and safety features are going to be embedded in more software moving forward, because at the end of the day, we're a highly regulated industry, and a lot of the people that underwrite a fleet want more information. This is even the freight brokerage, right? You see this rise of software to make sure I'm tendering the load. There's risks there. Am I tendering the right load? And I want to know. It's just not, no more. Can I just use like Safer Watch or another product just to see, are they active? I need more. I don't care if they just have valid insurance. I want to know that driver in that truck is the right person, because I am tendering them over a very valuable load. So I think risk across the ecosystem of how shipments are moving is going to be more prevalent, not just people who are leveraging trucking capacity, but the people underwriting it at the end of the day. So I don't know, that's kind of a roundabout way of saying where products like Hull or what the software building is going to be really more embedded into the day-to-day activities that we're used to seeing.
Putting that valuable data instead of in a silo, almost more on the edge, right? It's at the fingertips of whoever needs it exactly when they need it.
Front and center, loss control, right? I think, and loss control is a very broad risk phrase, but it's how do I protect myself in this moment right now? And it's whether it's just, and that's the right carrier, I'm turning a load, I'm an insurance carrier, I wrote them this policy. Are they breaking it? Are they maintaining it? Because at the end of the day, all this doesn't work if insurance is not comfortable with the risk they're underwriting. So that is really what I'm seeing in the next 5 years, where we're ready. Hall is kind of pushing that mindset within the insurance markets today, with some initial partnerships.
I think we're running up on time here, Tim, but I got one last question for you. If any carriers want to get connected, they want to learn more about Hall, see what you guys have to offer, how should they reach out? What should they do here?
Yeah, it's hallcompliance.com is our landing page. You can book a demo. There's a lot of information just to learn about us. Or just email hello@hallcompliance.com and someone will follow up with you. And yeah, we hope to have more content out there. What we're learning is that software cannot just solve it all. It really does take leveling up people who are managing the software. And, shout out to Truck Safe and our partnership. That's a classic example of software just can't do everything for you, right? You do need to understand how to operate it. And we're very pragmatic builders in the sense where, hey, there's one thing to deploy software, but, our motto is not answering a lot of the questions. It's so really connecting a fleet who deployed whole with a DOT consultant on the side, is really building the platform that helps trucking really manage risk across the board, right? Really connecting the right parties to really talk about that risk right now. Yeah, that's kind of what we're building. It's really playing out that way. But anyway, long-winded way, hullcompliance.com. You can reach out to us there, or hello@hullcompliance.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Tim. Tim from Hall Compliance. Appreciate taking the time here today.
Thanks. You have a good one.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Trucking Tomorrow. The show notes include links to any resources mentioned in today's show. And if you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.
With truck base, you're always tough.